Hello and welcome back to Season 7 of the MRX Lab podcast, the show from FlexMR where this year we're on a mission to share inspiring stories, tips and tricks about how you can put customer salience at the heart of your business. To help me do that, I'm absolutely thrilled to have with me today Paul Thomas, formerly of Diageo and Ferrero. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Paul, it's great to be here. Thank you.
To kick us off, let me ask one question. What does customer centricity mean to you, and is it important?
Customer centricity, Paul, is what keeps me in a job. It's what ensures I can pay my mortgage. Fundamentally, bringing, as a client-side researcher, bringing the voice of the customer or the consumer or the shopper into the business is what differentiates a successful versus a failing business. It is critically important because if we can't understand our customer, how on earth are we supposed to market for them?
Great answer. And when we talk about customer centricity, I mean, I often talk about a culture of customer because the words just seem to live and breathe a bit more for me. How do we, I mean, are businesses customer centric? Do they live by that? Because they're often embedded in brand values and statistically 73 or 75% of CMOs say it's critical. But are we successful in doing it?
The thing is, they might say that, Paul, but every year I say I'm going to give up alcohol in January and it hasn't happened yet. But it sounds good to be consumer-centric. I don't think many companies are. I think the majority of them rarely spend time looking into the whites of their eyes of the consumer. I've been lucky in the last 10 years to predominantly work in the alcohol industry where every pub around the corner has a customer that we can go and talk to, whether that's behind the bar buying the products or whether that's sitting at the bar actually having the cocktails. You'd be amazed how rare it is for big companies to invest time in actually meeting the people who buy their products.
See, that's really interesting because, when you think about it, the companies you work for, your consumers are physically present when they consume product, whereas a lot of businesses that we work with, they're not there physically with them, or they're in the homes. They might be buying electronic goods. They might be buying things online. It might be they're not necessarily in a place that I can easily find. And yet you're saying, despite that,
I think there's often, and look, companies are trying to do better things about it, but the reality is marketers often fall into the mistake of thinking they are their own customer. So they talk about their anecdotes. I mean, the amount of times I've heard a general manager going, well, I understand Gen Z because my daughter's Gen Z. It's like, yeah, but she's the Gen Z daughter of a millionaire. It's slightly different from someone growing up, in tough times. There are companies and there are schemes that make it easier and harder. In my previous role, we've rolled out a whole system of consumer connects across the whole of Europe, where we simply recruit consumers, write our own discussion guides and meet them in bars. And I can tell you learn more having those conversations, even if, the marketer running it is not a trained qualitative researcher, it's just a chat. You learn more than that than you often will a £100,000 quant study, which sits there collecting dust somewhere in the cloud.
Wow. Okay. So picking apart that, why do you think that's the case? Why do you think you learn more from that if it's not, trained, reported, analysed market research?
Well, I think firstly, again, there shouldn't be a distinction between insight people and non-insight people. We should all be looking for insights. But really, when we talk, I often think companies are really bad at taking the lessons that they try and teach others. 101 marketing firms will talk about the importance of memorability in their advertising. The reason that those one-to-one connections or those, those customer connects work is because they stick in your mind. You read a 100-page market research report, and with respect, I've both written them and read them. They don't stay in your mind. Whereas that one conversation you had with Steve in the bar, as I choose the most generic person I could, that will stay with you. I mean, I can give you an anecdote. About 15 years ago, so I had my first head of insight role in Ferrero UK. We couldn't work out why Kinder Eggs weren't growing. They'd invested so much in advertising. They'd invested so much in promotions. Nothing was making it grow. We went out as a marketing team, I organised it, and each one of us spent the day with a mum and a dad and their child. And what we all realised was that no research was telling us what the real problem was, whereas when we saw it with the whites of our eyes, we got it, which was that moment when mum or dad has spent more than they need to buy a chocolate egg that's 4 times the price of anything else. If the child doesn't like the toy and the toy just gets chucked in the bin, that's a real sense of emotional disappointment for the parent. So the insight from that was, well, we still want it to be a surprise, but if we had 2 or 3 ranges, so if you choose egg 1, you're going to get maybe a car or a vehicle. If you choose range 2, it might be a hippo or a whatever. Simply by doing that, you remove the element of risk. The brand grew 60% in 3 years. And that was solely based on a customer moment, white of eyes time. And we'd spent maybe £300,000 on research, which hadn't unearthed that insight for us.
Wow. So that's a really interesting, because your point before was about anecdotes, and the danger of anecdotes. But that was because it was an anecdote taken out of context, not the real customer, or an anecdote that's supporting someone else's previous thought.
Fundamentally, anecdotes, once you've heard them often enough, become data.
Yes.
Is the truth. Now, I wouldn't want to base any decision on I heard one person say, but if you do implement a regular program of Customer Connect, you'll start to hear the same things bubble up to the surface. Or alternatively, you get so much more truth from consumers because it's a more comfortable, chatty type environment, that you'll get better and more honest answers than you would in a formal focus group. If I can go down anecdote route 2, launching a new beer brand in Ghana, in West Africa. Now, the Ghanaians culturally are very respectful people. They only want to please, and it's a real problem in research groups. So every research group told us that this new product is perfect. It's cheaper. It's exactly what they want. They love it. They want to save money. Barely could sell a bottle of it. We went and just spent some evening in some bars and started to watch and just have chats. The simple reason being is that putting it in a brown bottle cued that I was poor, which culturally, even if they're saying in a focus group, I want a lower price, they don't want to show to their friends that they can't afford a green bottle. So again, that was based on spending time with the customer, and that brand eventually got delisted and never should have been launched in the first place, because we relied on perhaps more traditional, I'm going to tell you type research versus we're going to have a chat and listen and watch.
So Truman used to say many, many years ago that nobody consumed a product in a room with 7 strangers on a wet Tuesday night. That's not where those products are bought and sold. So why are we researching them in that setting?
I think it can be very, very true. Again, having worked a lot in the alcohol industry, when you do product testing, when someone is in a hotel in High Wycombe or above the town hall in High Wycombe, and they're brought in 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning to try 50 centilitres of a fizzy drink. It probably tastes nice because it's sweet. Give them 2 cans of it, spend 6 and see. So I think increasingly when it comes to product testing, placing products with people, watching them, seeing how, if it's a mum, do they want their children to have it? How does it get shared out? The value in that, and you often don't need, N equals 200 that you might for a formal product test. Place it with 30 families and watch what happens.
Well, again, it's the setting, isn't it? It's the context.
Yeah.
It's the context of the family. I mean, why are we doing those things with one person? I mean, exactly. Send it to in the home, and then we can see the influence of the
100%.
family. Because going back to your Kinder example, it's mum and dad that are an influence in there. It's that dynamic in that context at that time. The same as if you send a product into someone's home, you'll see it consumed or not 100%. Consumed, and the influence around it. It's the influences around it, isn't it?
And it's so funny, Paul, going back to that question of context and reality. So whenever we did focus groups about Kinder eggs, the answers from mums is that their children were all angels and they deserved a treat, and it was all about emotional reward. Then you go and spend some time with some real people. don't have time. They just need 5 minutes of peace and quiet, and they need that kid to shut up more than anything in the world. So the Kinder Egg becomes a please play with the toy versus that little Johnny, he deserves it. It's like, shut up, Johnny.
It's just that purchase. I mean, I've been there myself. Again, I'm not looking at the price, in all honesty. I'm just
will them keep them quiet for the rest of this supermarket
Will it
trip?
just happen? Don't take me down that route. But again, if I come back to the anecdote, you said before about if we implement enough of these, but it's also the structure. I mean, going back to that Kinder example, the structure, it wasn't just you on your own with that anecdote. There would have been a process where you described you as a team did it. So there was still a process around it where you're still coming back and discussing it and what it means and what happened. I guess that's a form of analysis. That surely is still happening, right?
And to use the word you used earlier, which is culture, it's creating that culture of curiosity, I call it, which is we do not just go out and sit in bars on a Thursday night and pretend we've engaged with our consumers. We as a team will define the business questions that we want to answer. We will work with a recruiter to find the right people or the right bartender in the alcohol industry case. And then after the team has gone out and met, let's say it's 12 different mums or 12 different drinkers in a bar, whatever it might be, we'll then come back together and analyse it and look for common patterns. It is exactly like a classic qualitative project, but it is done with the extra richness of the client, not just doing the work, but seeing the people. And I am someone who, and a lot of people would complain about the fact, could waffle on about anecdotes for years, but very often it's the anecdotes in my careers, the moments where I've been there and I've seen it, which has added so much more value than someone else writing about what they've seen. So
let's unpack that. I mean, I often talk about video quite a lot because video has emotion in it. Now, businesses are a lot of the time thinking about customers as numbers, as data points. And data points lack emotion. They lack context. They lack all of those things we've just talked about. The messy middle, the grey, those emotional. We're not going to admit to some of that, I just want you to shut up to have the Kinder Egg moment. So it's all of that emotion, the messy emotion that is missing in data. Is that why an anecdote has the same way that video has?
I think that's completely right. It personalises it and you start to put a name and a face on what you're doing. Again, I'll give another example of working in Africa, this time in Madagascar, where a company I was working for was looking to launch a spirit brand that was perhaps 10% more expensive than the local produced spirit, the local rum. They could not work out why it wouldn't sell. I went to one of these bars, drank an unconscionable amount of rum during the process, and you quickly learn the reason being is what we are looking at as Western, brand owners. Well, it's 10p. That's the electricity for 2 days in the context of Madagascar. So you start to realise that trade-up thing just isn't an option without them sacrificing some of life essentials. And suddenly when you start to hear those sort of stories, rather than of n equals 150, 62% have said that, you really start to think differently about your consumer and your responsibility to them. Fundamental tenet of what we do in the research industry and in marketing is we are trying to make people pay more for products. However, we still need to do it in a way which is responsible and looking after them, in my view.
But it's also, it is all of that. But you're painting a picture of someone's life there. But you say, as you tell that story, as you paint that picture of that life, I guess I tune into it.
It often helps as well, Paul, with a reality check that when you work for a brand, it's very easy to think that your consumer, your customer, only exists in that moment when they are buying your brand. What can be fascinating is the 99% of the time they're not buying your brand, and why. Different products they're choosing, different categories, different brands. Having that fuller understanding of from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed can be so much more enlightening than just going, on this specific drinking occasion, would you buy our product, yes or no?
So true, drinking occasion, I love that phrase as well. We think about occasions, purchase occasions.
And we don't, I've been talking increasingly, as the alcohol industry faces some particular problems around, we need to understand that you're actually in a battle for share of entertainment, not share of drink. People are choosing whether to go to the cinema or have a drink. And again, you need to understand the full life of your consumer to get. It's not just a question of are they choosing not to drink or not. It's what else are they doing and how can we benefit from it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's other choices. It's not I've chosen to drink and therefore I'm choosing a drink.
Exactly.
A whole myriad of things going in there. So let's come back to the organisation. We've talked about anecdotes. We've talked about customers and how we get to context and emotion and real life. But let's talk about the organisation. How do we reach the organisation? How do we create a culture of customer within an organisation?
The truth is, and I believe it's true for anything in insights, but specifically for this, is it has to come from the top down. The behaviour has to be shown by the CEO, the MD, the marketing director. If it's only the juniors, the assistant brand managers, the brand managers who are going out and doing it, you do not have a culture of consumer centricity. So it has to come. My most recent employer, whenever he visited a market, so this is the CEO of the company, even as a busy, important CEO, would leave one day to just go and see the trade and meet customers. Mm-hmm. And that's the CEO. And when you see the CEO has time to meet the bartenders, has time to talk to why are you choosing this product or not, the brand manager's sitting at their desk going, well, I don't have time to do that. I've got to write a report. It all falls away. So it has to come from the top. It has to be done consistently. It can't just be a one-off. It has to be a program. And it has to be flexible as well. So there are different scales of what customer centricity can be. There is a lot of what I've talked about so far has been face-to-face. That's easy if you're allowed to travel. If you're not and you need to meet your consumer, or if you're in London and you need to understand what someone in Burnley is doing, right? Online. You can recruit people for online interviews, even run your own little online focus groups if you want to. And having that flexibility of there are certain business questions where we think it's worth spending the money to send you out and to meet these people. But there's also just an ongoing program of, well, once a month, you're going to meet one of your consumers and have an hour's Teams chat. Fantastic. That way, there's something for everyone. If you don't have time to get out there, you can do something online. And it's having that sort of flexibility of system, but a program that's endorsed right from the top, which is always the key to success.
Questions coming from that. That a program of that sort takes investment, right? And without a business question, does that investment come? Because there is no business question to answer.
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think, look, I've set up this kind of thing in three of the marketing companies I've worked for as the insight lead. You always have to start with proof of concept. So at first, you will not have a program. You will find one case to prove your point. But it very often has a snowball effect for me. If you get your marketing director out with the team and they come back and they answer one of their fundamental business questions for much less than it would cost them to do formal research, and much less than if they don't do anything and the brand gets knackered, they're going to start asking for it. We started with a couple of case examples to then run out a regional program to then prove the concept to go global. But yeah, it will often, most client businesses are now working on a zero-based budget approach, which is both brilliant as it sharpens the focus and it's bloody hard work. You just have to prove that it's going to make you money back. Customer centricity has to be able to prove it has the same ROI as buying your Nielsen data and things like that.
Yeah, it does, which is my next question, because it's about coming from the top and where the blocker is. So we often talk about the customer delivery gap. Mm-hmm. So there's data out there about 75% of, essentially 3/4 CMOs say that customer centricity is critical to the success of their business. And yet only about 14% think it is a hallmark of their brand. So 3/4 saying it's critical, and yet of the same people, 14% saying they're achieving it. So it's coming from the top. It should be coming from the top. Where's the blocker in that?
I think there's a couple of blockers. I mean, look, budget is always a blocker. Increasingly, the marketing world is being told that everything can be done by AI. And what we're actually saying is, no. Actually going back to the most basic human of interaction, looking in the whites of someone's eyes is critical. That's quite a difficult message for people to take, because the whole of market research seems, and I could rant about this, determined to commoditize itself in every way possible. Whereas we're saying, no, you need to save money to do these things really well. The second problem you have is that it's not my job syndrome. A lot of client-side researchers, 80 to 90% of their job can be more like KPIs and your sellout numbers and things like that. Maybe then there's 10%, which is running a concept test, managing a brand tracker. But something like customer centricity takes a different mindset than a sort of average, well, I produce my weekly Nielsen numbers and I'm done type person. And then, I mean, finally, the truth is, consistency is difficult in big businesses because of the constant frequency of reorganizations. Many businesses have great people and great ideas, which then every 3 years people get moved around and those things fall by. The biggest barrier is that they're still, for most businesses, seen as a cherry on top of the cake. We have to have our Nielsen, we have to have our Kantar tracking, we have to have our innovation testing. So everything looking backwards, proving that we're moving in the... Increasingly looking forwards and trying to find new insights is you're having to fight for every penny. And it takes really strong insight leaders and marketing leaders to champion it. It's a difficult sell if you haven't got your marketing director wanting to do it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but the marketing director wants to do it, I guess, or says it's important. But then all of those other things must get in the way to stop it happening.
It's the day-to-day reality. You know, it's the same way that all marketers want to spend about 60% on forward-facing equity building and only 40% on tactics, you know, the Binet field model. Reality comes where Tesco says you've got to be a certain price. There are a million things every day getting in the way of what we want to do. But I'll always make this point. If a CEO visits a market, the market will comfortably find £20,000 to put on a nice dinner, dress up the office, take people out. If Tesco say, we urgently want to work with you on this £50,000 project, everyone finds £50,000. So money is always available at clients. It's just sometimes, honestly, insight teams are not persistent enough and perhaps not good enough at selling the ROI so that when they ask, it's seen as just as critical.
Okay, so how do we change that? Because again, the commoditization point, I guess, comes back into my mind. Another point might be, is it about how we think about ourselves as marketeers in there? Do we have the right skill set to do it? What's the switch that changes us from, I guess, a support function to being something more influential in that space?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. I don't consider myself a market researcher. I consider myself someone who has worked at major businesses for about 20 years, has worked on marketing projects, innovation projects, category projects. It just so happens that my extra area of speciality is research. And that mindset means I don't think my job is to deliver research. I think my job is to deliver growth for my brands. If I believe that a program of customer centricity is critical to the growth of my brands, then it's as much my job to sell that as it is to say, well, I believe in methodology X over Y in quant or whatever it might be. So it is moving away from that static, we are here to provide numbers when the marketing team wants it. It's moving us onto the front foot of being proactive and saying to our colleagues, to a certain extent, we know what's good for you and we know what you need. If you don't have this, you're gonna really struggle. The difficulty is, speaking from years on the client side, the easiest thing to do is just what your marketing director asks you to do every day. The hardest thing is to elevate the role of insights so that you're not just doing what you're told, you're telling them what they need from an insights point of view. That makes your day job a lot harder because you're battling, but it makes it a lot more successful when it pays off.
So here's a hard question then. The marketing director obviously has to set the tone. They have to say customer centricity matters, but who then has to take up that mantle and say, I own the culture of customer? Who, obviously they are the sponsor of the culture of customer, but who's owning it?
I think it's a brilliant question. I think the reality is, because of the nature of how organizations are set up, there will always be an overrepresentation of the insights function leading and supporting that. Where I've seen it worked best is where, okay, it might start with insights setting up the program. It might always be insights who works with, say, a recruitment agency, but there are different representatives from each team who are then incentivized and have their objectives against it. So there is someone who's a brand manager in the marketing team who under their objectives has organizing customer centricity for the marketing team. There is someone in the category team who has something similar. So it sounds a little bit draconian, but very often client side, if you want stuff done, put it on people's objectives. Because the second it's on their objectives and the bonus depends on it, it happens.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I know it seems incredibly prosaic, but if I know that I'm going to get more money out of delivering something, you care more. It's the truth.
Well, that's good. So even if I own customer centricity or customer culture of customer, someone has to also put it on my objective.
Yeah.
To believe in that.
Because otherwise, if your boss then comes with 10 other things that are on your objectives and customer centricity isn't, you're only one person, you can only do so much work, and it can fall off the list.
But that also then makes me challenge whether 75% of CMOs really do think customer centricity is critical, because I don't see anyone saying this is on my objectives.
No, I don't.
Otherwise there wouldn't be a question of who owns it.
I think they believe it's important, but I think there's a complete self-delusion that all of their teams are close to the consumer. I'm willing to bet if you ask most marketing director, when's the last time you actually spent an evening with a genuine consumer or customer, it would be over 6 months ago. And that's if I'm being optimistic.
So that also raises the question, do we even know at that in an organisation what a customer culture means in that case? Because we're not putting on the objectives. We're not necessarily getting out there and meeting customers. We're not necessarily funding programs or proactivity. We're looking at reactive data points.
Yep.
And we're looking at the data points, not the whites of people's eyes. So, I mean, just at a simplistic level, that would say we're not getting what a culture of customer is, let alone
Which
think
I'd
about
probably, I won't name companies I've worked for, but some are really good and some are really bad. Some do have it in their culture. I mean, 2 companies I've worked for are Japanese, and the Japanese have a wonderful word which encapsulates many, like so much of the Japanese language, which is gemba. And gemba means going to the place where value is created. And inherent in those 2 Japanese companies, in Japan, it's 1 afternoon a week the team are expected to go out and meet customers. 1 afternoon a week.
Wow.
So it does exist, and it does then come through company cultures. But there are others I've worked for, and I'm again not here to name names, who the staff aren't even allowed to expense a drink on their own brands on an evening out if they can speak to someone. So that sends a message of, we don't want you out there speaking to people, we're not going to help you. So different companies have completely different mindsets, but I think many see it as a tick box. Yes, of course we're customer centric. Don't you know we read an Ipsos report 4 years ago, we must be customer centric. But actually getting out there and seeing the value of the time spent in field, sadly isn't as often as it should be. And there's not an excuse. Every company has sales reps every day going out, meeting potential customers. Different. And I work in typically FMCG categories. So I can walk out of here into a corner shop and ask the chap, which is your fastest selling vape and why? Tell me a little bit about why you're stocking that energy drink. That's customer centricity. But it needs to be encouraged and it needs to be rewarded, and maybe, it needs to be put on people's objectives to make it work.
I love that word, gemba. Is that right?
Yep.
Gemba.
Heard it here first.
Heard it here first. Which brings me to probably my final question here, which is probably the hardest lot given the range of conversation we've talked about. If there's one thing that we want our listeners to take away from today's episode, what do you think that might be? One thing.
Customer centricity should start with your own 2 feet. we're lucky to work in an industry that's full of charm and mystery. Go and ask some questions. Once you start modelling that behaviour and you start coming back to the teams with that level of insight, that can sort of be the butterfly wing that causes the hurricane of the entire business taking off. But if you're not going out there and asking customers, retailers, having those chats for 5 minutes about your category, then what chance do the rest of us have?
Yeah, I love that. So the one thing we're really talking about is act it almost. Yeah. Act it out, believe in it, show it, lead it in there, which I think is a great point to end on, really, which has been a fantastic discussion. We've covered a wide range of things. So thank you, Paul, for joining me today. Thank you also to the audience for tuning in to today's discussion. We may be out of time today, but I'll be back next month with another episode with more inspiring stories about how to embed customer insight and customer salience in the heart of your organizations. But until then, I've been your host, Paul Hudson, and this has been the MRX Lab.